Okay, so this is the second video. This one is going to be about movements. If you made it to this video, that's good because that means you probably know more about watches than probably most of the people that's out there now. First one was boring. It was a lot of history, but this one is going to be a lot more fun because now we're going to talk about probably one of the most important things that some people would say in the watch, and that's the movement. So if you remember back from the first episode, we were talking about how the movement is the brains of the watch, essentially that controls the hands, the timekeeping, so forth and so on. Something you need to be aware of is if someone says automatic movement, what that means is that the gears in the watch, mechanical movement, are going to be powered by just the activity of you wearing it. If you ever seen a watch winder, what that does is it simulates you moving it. So essentially spins the watch around. So before you go into the store, something to be important of is the movement, because this is where the salesperson is going to try to tell you, well, I don't know. I mean, as much as the brand, it's going to determine the price. So if you're watching this far, let me just get one thing out of the way. You probably want to know when he's going to talk about Rolex. So let's say Rolex. Just know that Rolex has their own movement. Got that out of the way. But I'm also going to talk about other type of movements, Swiss movements that are out there. So, if a company makes their own movement for a watch, it's considered an in-house movement. That means that they've designed it themselves over years. They've perfected it. Other places may not make their own movement. So let me give an example. Since we're both talking about mechanical things, I'll give you an example that you can probably understand as it relates to cars, and then it'll probably tie it all in together. Let's say, for example, you wanted to come out with a car brand, and maybe your brand of cars, what you were going to sell is really the design. You're really selling maybe the aesthetics, the materials. Maybe your car is only going to have carbon fiber, everything. Maybe it's going to have the most leather. So your car brand is focused mainly on aesthetics and maybe some type of heritage. If you're going to make a car, you still need an engine for that car, right? Now, you could spend years and millions of dollars trying to perfect your own engine, or maybe you can get an engine from somewhere else. So say, for example, you like the Corvette, the V8 engine, right? There's nothing to stop you from saying, okay, I'm going to go to GM, I'm going to order 1,000 of these engines, I'm going to put them in my car, and then I'm going to sell that car. If somebody were to come to you and say, well, is your car better than a Corvette? I mean, that's kind of hard to say, right? Because they both got the same engine. Let me tell you how that relates to watch movements. So you may hear the term ETA movement. And when you hear ETA movement, this is what you need to know. ETA is a subsidiary of the Swatch Group. Yes, the same Swatch Group from the 80s commercials. They have different types of movements based on price and complexity. The Swatch Group has three main movements that they sell to other watch companies. One of them is your standard. Another one has more complications. Other ones are for chronographs. But just know that if you wanted to start your own watch brand, essentially you would need to have a movement, you would need to have a case, and you would need to have something else. So just know that you could get an ETA movement, just like that analogy I made with the Corvette, getting an engine from GM. You could get a movement for your watch from ETA, maybe get a case from some other place, put it together, boom, now you got your watch brand. Not sure if you knew that or not. The main thing you need to be aware of as far as movements are ETA versus in-house. In-house means that this is a company who makes their own movement in-house. They make it internally versus ETA, meaning that they outsource it. Essentially, they get the movement from somebody else. Yeah, maybe they tweak a couple things in the movement from ETA, but just know that they're getting it from ETA. And you can Google all this for more detailed information if you want. Does the movement make it better, whether it's in-house or ETA? This is kind of a controversial topic because you would say, well, if it's in-house, that means it's more proprietary, it's custom, it's better quality. But the reason why I gave you the whole history in the first episode was to try to keep an idea of what you're trying to do here, right? Purpose of a watch is to tell time. And in 2016, you have other options of telling time. So it's not absolutely critical, probably, that you have the most exact time. And again, all these mechanical movements are not going to be as accurate as a quartz movement, which is a lot cheaper. So before you get caught up in this, well, I want an in-house movement for my watch, just know that both of them, in-house or ETA, are both going to tell time pretty good. I was saying that there's in-house and ETA. So one last thing on ETA. So here are some luxury watch brands with ETA movement: Tudor, Breitling, Fortis, Cartier, Omega, IWC, Tag, Breitling, Panerai, all respected brands, right? So some luxury brands with in-house movements are going to be Rolex, Tudor, Omega. So if you noticed, I said Omega had watches with both in-house movements, their coaxial movement, but they also have ETA movements. Omega uses some ETA movements. Omega uses some of their own movements for certain things. Just depends on which one it is. So keep that in mind when the discussion comes up about which one is better. The point I'm trying to make is that a lot of these watch brands might have some models where they use their own movement, like IWC, and they have other models where they use an ETA. And IWC, you can Google that also. Mechanical versus quartz movement. So if you go back to the first episode in this series, I was talking about quartz movement, how essentially it's powered by battery. Some advantages of an automatic movement over quartz movement is that automatic movement doesn't have a battery. So you never have to worry about being somewhere and having to get a battery change. Maybe you're in the Middle East or, Mexico, I don't know, somewhere in Nevada where there's not a lot of watch guys around. If you have a mechanical movement, you never have to worry about changing batteries. That's an advantage. Automatic movements, they are very accurate, like I said before, but they do gain or lose time every day. There's a standards body that governs that, but they're both going to be very accurate. And like I told you before, the automatic movement is powered by you wearing it, power from there. Some advantages of a quartz movement is they're a lot less expensive. And they're generally more accurate than an automatic watch. So some of these big brands you may have heard of, Patek, Rolex, have their in-house movements, mechanical movements. Just know that if you want to get down to which one is telling time better, quartz movements are always going to be more accurate than in-house movements. Quartz might sound like, well, yeah, that sounds like something you want to go for, right? Because it's going to be cheaper, better time. But, like I said in the first video, a lot of times things aren't just about function and timekeeping. For example, with some of these automatic watches, you get a lot more heritage. Like with Rolex, you're buying the heritage of some of the models they came out with, the history, Omega, Patek, IWC. You're buying heritage. And just to even make it more confusing about mechanical versus quartz movements, remember I said how the automatic movement is powered by the motion of you wearing it. Well, some people have problems with those type of watches because I guess they're not that active or active enough. So they'll take their watch back after spending a few $1,000s and they'll tell the jeweler, hey, this watch isn't working, it keeps running. Well, you're not moving enough. Let's talk about maintenance now. Something you should keep in mind. So because an automatic watch is a machine, it requires periodic maintenance to make sure it's clean and properly lubricated. So when you think about what watch to buy, you want to try to keep in mind what you're buying into. It's not just the upfront purchase. You're going to need to have this watch service every 5 or 6 years. This is a general guideline. But just know that it's not like a one-time, one and done. I buy this watch, I wear it for the rest of my life. No, you're going to need to put money into it every so often to make sure that, the bracelet is clean. If it's a waterproof thing, that the gasket isn't leaking. There's a lot of stuff that goes into the service. So let's say you get like a Tag or an Omega that has that ETA movement, right? So because those movements are more available, and more people know how to work on them, the maintenance is a lot cheaper on those, just like you can imagine, because parts are easier to get. A lot of people who have worked on, maybe they've worked on 10 different types of watches because they all have the same type of engine in there, the movement. There's a lot of expertise around, so that means the price is going to be lower. So if you're going to get basic service on like a Tag or Omega, I just had to get some service done for a Tag that I own, and it was around $500 at the top end. That's basically complete disassembly of the watch, reassembly, the movement, lubrication, part replacement, polishing the base, hand, and bezel. Around $500. Whereas basic service on your Rolex is going to be around $1,000, depending on the model. What we talked about so far were, in-house movements versus ETA, some of the pros and cons of in-house movements versus NTA. Does the movement make it better? Don't think that just because this is an in-house movement, like a Patek or Rolex or something else like that, that's better. It just means that they have their own movement. The good part of that is you have more prestige, but the bad part of that is going to be that you're going to pay for that in the back end as far as maintenance and if something ever happens, getting parts for it. And I think also Rolex is really starting to tighten up on their movements where they won't even sell parts to an independent watch shop. Like if you have any type of repair needs, they want you to send it directly to them. So something to keep in mind about that. At the end of the day, what you're trying to do is tell time. Both an in-house movement or an ETA movement are both going to tell time very well. A huge selling point historically of watches were their reliability on timekeeping, but keep in mind now that we have a lot more. Everybody probably has their phone with them, or telling what time it is not going to be a problem as much as it was back in the 50s, 60s when these things happened. And again, if you watch the first video, that's why I spent so much time on the history, just to kind of give you a point of view of where you're coming from here. Brand, name, plus the movement are the biggest factors in determining price. And then if you go for an in-house movement, think about what you're buying into on that point. Okay? Something to keep in mind. On the next video, which is going to wrap this up, I'm going to talk about, finally, you got the history, you know about the movements, now you're ready to go into that store and make that big boy purchase, your first one. I'm going to tell you about how to maybe pick a watch for you. Okay? Thanks for watching this video. See you on the next one. Goodbye.